The first time I realized my daughter was married, I was standing in aisle 7 of a Kroger in Plano, Texas, holding a box of cinnamon oatmeal and trying to remember whether I still liked cinnamon oatmeal. That is not poetic. That is exactly where I was. It was 8:42 on a Thursday morning, the kind of bright Texas morning that makes every car windshield look like it's trying to blind you personally. And I had just come from my dentist on Preston Road. No cavities, one lecture about flossing, and a free toothbrush I did not need. I was wearing my Old Navy jacket, the one with the loose cuff button, and my 1998 Omega Seamaster was sitting a little heavy on my wrist because the weather was already warming up. I remember all of that because numbers and details have always been how I keep my balance. I was a forensic accountant for 31 years. I found money people tried to hide. I found patterns in receipts, lies in invoices, brochure in signatures. I once spent 11 days reconstructing the finances of a bankrupt trucking company from fuel cards, toll records, and one coffee-stained spiral notebook. And trust me, when you do that kind of work long enough, you learn something most people never do. Money talks. It just does not talk loudly. It whispers in dates, amounts, habits, and tiny repeated choices. So there I was, holding oatmeal, when I saw my daughter's hand on the shoulder of a man I had never met, not just touching him, resting there, comfortable, familiar. A woman touches a stranger one way. She touches someone she loves another way. A father notices. He may pretend he doesn't, but he notices. My daughter, Elise, was 32 then, smart, private, stubborn in a way I used to admire before it started being used against me. She had her mother's eyes and my habit of pausing before answering a question. She worked in commercial interior design, mostly hotel renovations and office lobbies, the kind of spaces where everything looks expensive, but nobody knows exactly why. She had been living in Frisco for about 4 years, and she called me every Sunday at 6:30 p.m., not 6:29, not 6:31, 6:30. That had been our thing since her mother passed. Her mother, Lydia, died on the 14th of March 2019 at 2:11 a.m. in room 418 of Baylor, Scott and White. I know the room number because I stared at it for 7 hours. After that, Elise and I became quieter with each other, but closer. At least I thought so. Grief does that sometimes. It turns a family into two people sitting in the same boat, not rowing exactly, just refusing to let go. So when I saw her in that grocery store with that man, laughing in a soft way I had not heard from her in months, something in my stomach shifted. That was the first red flag. Not because she was with a man. I wanted my daughter happy. I had told her that more than once. I had even said it out loud with dignity, which, if you know me, is the closest thing to a miracle. No, the problem was the ring. Plain gold band. Left hand, she reached for a jar of almond butter, and there it was. Small, clean, certain. I stood there with my oatmeal and felt the air move around me, like I had suddenly become furniture. She saw me about 3 seconds later. Her face changed. Not dramatically. Elise was never dramatic. Her mouth just softened at the corners, then tightened. Her hand dropped from his shoulder. The man turned, and I got my first look at him. He was handsome in a carefully arranged way. Dark hair, trimmed beard, expensive casual shirt, shoes too clean for a grocery store. He had that smile some men practice in reflective elevators, warm enough for strangers, empty enough for exits. Dad, Elise said, one word, but it landed like a file folder slapped onto a table. I looked at her hand again. I did not mean to. It just happened. The man saw me see it. He lifted his chin slightly. That told me more than his smile did. Elise, I said, morning. She swallowed. I was going to tell you. Here's the thing. When someone says they were going to tell you, what they usually mean is they had already decided not to until the cost of silence became higher than the cost of truth. I have billed people $375 an hour to explain that sentence in court. I looked at the man. He extended his hand. You must be Mr. Harlan. Daniel, I said. Right, Daniel. His hand was dry, firm, professional. I'm Marcus. No last name. Another red flag. I shook his hand anyway, because manners are not proof of trust. They are just proof you were raised correctly. Elise looked between us, and for a second, she was 12 years old again, standing in our kitchen after breaking the glass pitcher her grandmother loved. Same face, same fear of disappointing me. I hated that. I hated it more than the ring. Marcus Val, he added, as if he had remembered people come with full names. I nodded. Then I said, congratulations. The word came out clean, maybe too clean. Elise blinked. Marcus smiled wider. Thank you, he said. I was not talking to him. I looked at my daughter. How long? She rubbed her thumb against the ring. 6 months. 6 months. Not 6 days. Not 2 weeks. 6 months. That meant Christmas. That meant my birthday dinner at Seasons 52. That meant the Sunday calls. That meant the night she came over because her dishwasher flooded and sat at my kitchen counter eating leftover chicken tortilla soup while wearing a wedding ring she had taken off before coming inside. I mean, that literally, she had removed it to sit across from me. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I see, I said. Marcus shifted his weight. His jaw did not tighten exactly, but it prepared itself. Men like that believe every room is a negotiation if they can just control the pace. Elise said, Dad, it wasn't like that. I almost smiled. Almost. Because it wasn't like that is what people say when it was exactly like that, just with better lighting. The grocery store speaker crackled overhead and some cheerful woman announced a sale on strawberries, 2 for $5. I remember that too. The absurd details stay with you. Betrayal often arrives next to a discount sign. I'm sure, I said. Then I put the oatmeal back on the shelf. Not because I was angry, because I did not want it anymore. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you genuinely. My name is Daniel Harlan. I was 58 years old when this began. Retired, technically, though retirement never fit me very well. Some men retire and discover golf. I retired and discovered that I could reorganize my garage by screw length and still not sleep past 5:40 a.m. I lived in a single-story brick house in Plano, just north of Park Boulevard, with 2 live oaks out front and a mailbox that leaned 3 degrees to the left no matter what I did to it. I drove a 2011 Lexus ES 350 with a scratch on the rear bumper from the time Elise borrowed it during college and backed into a concrete planter outside a Target. She cried for 20 minutes. I told her the car had character now. I kept the scratch. I kept too many things. Lydia's gardening gloves in the mudroom, Elise's 3rd grade spelling bee ribbon in a shoebox, the Omega Seamaster I bought myself in 1998, after solving my first major fraud case, a construction kickback scheme in Oklahoma City involving $842,611, and a man who thought paying vendors from his brother-in-law's company was subtle. It was not subtle. The watch had a tiny nick near the bezel, just above the 9. Lydia said it made it look lived in. I wore it every day after she died because grief makes strange little shrines out of ordinary objects. My quirk, if you want to call it that, is that I write things down, always have. Black leather notebook, 4 by 6 inches, elastic band, grid paper. I carry one in my jacket pocket even when I'm only going to buy oatmeal. People laugh at that until they need to remember the exact wording of something said in a conference room on a Tuesday. If it is not written down, it did not happen. That was my rule. It saved clients millions. It also saved me eventually, but not yet. That morning, I left Kroger without buying anything. I sat in my Lexus for a while with both hands on the steering wheel. The parking lot was busy in that ordinary suburban way, cartwheels rattling, an older couple arguing politely about bananas, a teenager in a Whataburger uniform jogging across the crosswalk like he was late for the rest of his life. I did not feel dramatic. I felt still. There is a difference. My phone buzzed before I turned the key. Elise. I let it ring. Then again. Then a text. Dad, please, don't do this in your head before we talk. That sentence bothered me. Not because she was wrong. Because she knew me. I typed back, dinner, Sunday, 6:30. She replied almost instantly. Can Marcus come? I stared at that for a long time. Then I wrote, yes. One word. No punctuation. Quiet power is not about withholding emotion. It is about not handing your opponent a map of where the soft places are. Now, at that point, Marcus was not my opponent. Not officially. He was my daughter's husband, apparently. A man I had never met, married to the only child I had, living inside a life I had helped fund from the edges. That last part matters because Elisa's design business had struggled after the pandemic. Contracts delayed. Clients canceled. A hotel group in Austin went under, owing her $48,300. She never asked me for money directly, not at first. She was proud, too proud sometimes, so I helped quietly. I paid off the remaining $21,764 on her student loans as a birthday restructuring, which made no sense, but she accepted because grief had made both of us bad at arguing. I covered $14,200 when her condo's HVAC system failed in August. I wrote a $35,000 check labeled Business Bridge after she lost that Austin contract. Later came $9,600 for software licenses, $18,750 for a vendor deposit she said had to clear before a client reimbursed her, then $52,000 into a small operating account after she told me she was expanding. I did not mind. That is what fathers do, within reason. But that phrase is important, within reason, and reason depends on truth. I called my oldest friend that afternoon. His name was Raymond Sutter, a state attorney, 71 years old, sharp as a drawer, full of razors, and twice as cheerful. We met at the University of Texas in 1987 when he tried to sell me a used microwave out of his dorm room for $40. The microwave did not work. He claimed he had said decorative microwave. I told him that was not a legal category. We had been friends ever since. Ray answered on the fourth ring. If you're calling before noon, someone's dead or someone's lying. Possibly neither, I said. Then this better involve barbecue. I told him about Kroger, about the ring, about 6 months, about Marcus Vale. Ray went quiet in the way lawyers go quiet when their mind has left the conversation and entered a filing cabinet. Then he said, last name again? Vale. V-A-L-E. I did not like that. What? Nothing yet. Ray. I said, yet? I'm being responsible. You should try it sometime. I looked at my notebook on the kitchen table. I had already written Marcus Vale, Kroger, 8:42 a.m., gold band, 6 months. Ray sighed. Do not confront him. I had dinner planned. Dinner is fine. Confrontation is not. Listen, Ask very little. Let him talk. Men who think they're charming hate silence. They fill it with evidence. That is why I loved Ray. He had a way of making cynicism sound like office procedure. Sunday came slowly. Elise arrived at 6:26 p.m. Marcus arrived with her, carrying a bottle of wine that cost about $78 if he bought it where I thought he bought it. I noticed because he left the label facing outward when he handed it to me. A performance. Beautiful home, he said. Thank you. Classic. That word sat wrong. Classic can mean elegant. It can also mean old. Elise gave me a careful hug. Her hand touched my back twice, light and quick, like she was checking whether I was still solid. Marcus looked around the entryway, taking inventory without moving his eyes too much. Good suit, better watch. Not as good as he thought. Dinner was pot roast, carrots, small potatoes, and green beans with almonds because Elise loved them when she was little and pretended not to now. We sat at the dining table Lydia chose in 2004 after visiting 8 furniture stores and rejecting every table that looked too pleased with itself. The silence sat like a fifth guest. Marcus complimented the food. Elise drank water and barely ate. I asked about his work. Strategic growth consulting, he said. You know what I did? I laughed. Not loudly, just one short breath through my nose. Marcus paused. Something funny? No, I said. Just a flexible phrase. Elise looked at me. Dad, I raised one hand. Just one. Marcus smiled again. I help companies scale intelligently. Capital positioning, acquisition readiness, operational restructuring. That was 3 fog machines stacked on top of each other. What companies? I asked. Mostly private clients. Industries? A mix. Specific mix? His jaw did that thing. That slow grinding thing. Dad, Elise said softly. I turned to her. I'm asking your husband what he does. Her hand froze on her glass. Husband. First time I had said it. Marcus leaned back slightly. I understand your concern, Daniel. Really. But Elise and I wanted to build something privately before bringing everyone into it. Everyone. There was no everyone. There was me. I looked at my daughter and something in her face told me she had rehearsed that sentence with him. Maybe not word for word, but close. It had the polished feel of language assembled from a catalog. 6 months privately, I said. She whispered, I know. Marcus reached under the table, I assume for her hand. She let him. That was when I noticed the bracelet. Thin gold chain, small emerald, new, expensive but not loud. Elise touched it twice during dinner, both times when Marcus answered for her. I wrote that down later. After dessert, Marcus asked if he could see my study. Men like Marcus always want to see the study. A man's study tells them what kind of leverage might exist. Books, awards, photographs, old files, ego. Some men hang their weakness on the wall in frames. I let him look. He stood near my shelves, eyes moving across tax law volumes, frame certifications, the photograph of Lydia and me in Santa Fe in 2016. Then he saw the locked file cabinet. Still keep paper records, he asked. I do. Old school. Effective. He smiled. Digital is cleaner. Not always. Our eyes met. For the first time that night, Marcus stopped performing for half a second. There he was. Not the husband, not the consultant, the calculator behind the smile. Then he said, Elise told me you helped her business through a rough patch. That was generous. I did not answer right away. Ray's voice came back to me. Let him talk. Marcus continued. She feels guilty about that sometimes. I told her family support is nothing to be ashamed of. Did you? Absolutely. How much did she say I helped? He blinked once. Small. Fast. But I saw it. Not exact numbers, he said. No? No. I nodded. That should have been the end of the conversation. A normal man would have left it there. Marcus was not a normal man. He stepped closer to the photograph of Lydia. She also said, "You're very protective," which I respect. But Elise is building a life now, our life. And sometimes fathers have trouble adjusting to that. There it was. Soft challenge. Clean knife. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "Marcus," I said. He looked at me. I said his name once, quietly. "You are standing in my house looking at my dead wife, explaining my daughter to me." Nobody said anything for a while. From the kitchen, Elise called, "Everything okay?" Marcus held my gaze 1 second too long, then smiled toward the hallway. "Of course," he said, but his smile had changed. So had mine. That night, after they left, I stood in the driveway and watched their taillights disappear down the street. Elise did not look back from the passenger seat. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the console, like a man who believed he had just survived the first round. I went inside, locked the door, and took out my black notebook. Then I opened my laptop. Not to dig, not yet, just to verify one thing. Marcus Vale, Strategic Growth Consultant, Plano, Texas. The first result was a LinkedIn page with too many adjectives. The second was an old business registration. The third was a county filing from 18 months earlier tied to a company called Vale North Advisory LLC, and the registered mailing address was familiar. Too familiar. It was the same address listed on 3 vendor invoices Elise had sent me the year before. The ones I had paid. I sat back in my chair and looked at Lydia's photograph on the bookshelf. Then I wrote one sentence in my notebook. This did not start 6 months ago. Sunday night bled into Monday morning without much sleep. That happens to me when numbers don't add up. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, persistent hum somewhere behind the eyes, like a refrigerator you forgot to unplug. I was at my kitchen table at 5:12 a.m. Coffee going cold. Notebook open, laptop glowing in that sterile way screens do before sunrise. The house was still. Even the old oak branches out front looked like they had agreed not to move. I had written 4 lines. Marcus Vale, Vale North Advisory LLC. Registered address, same as vendor #3. Invoices, 9/14, 10 halves, 11/18. Underneath that, I had written one more thing. Elise knew. I did not underline it. Questions do not become clearer when you decorate them. Here's the thing. When you've spent decades tracing financial behavior, you learn that patterns don't begin where they are first noticed. They begin where attention was first diverted. Somewhere, there had been a moment I chose not to ask a follow-up question. Somewhere, I had accepted a number because it sounded reasonable enough. Think about that for a second. Reasonable enough is how people walk into losses they can't explain later. I pulled up the invoices Elise had sent me the previous fall. I keep everything, not digitally alone, printed, clipped, dated, old habit, useful habit. Vendor #3 was listed as VNA Logistics and Procurement Support. The amounts were clean. Almost too clean. $18,750, $22,400, $11,960. No cents, no irregular decimals, no friction. That is not how real expenses behave. I mean that literally. Real numbers have edges, they have cents, they have imperfections. These were rounded like they had been smoothed over before being shown to me. I almost smiled. Almost. Then I opened the business registration for Vale North Advisory LLC. Again, filed 18 months ago. Managing member Marcus Vale. Registered agent, a service in Dallas that handles hundreds of shell entities a year. Nothing illegal about that. Plenty of legitimate businesses use registered agents. But then I noticed the formation date. 18 months ago, not 6. That was the second red flag. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my thumb across the nick on my watch bezel. Lydia used to do that when she was thinking, like she could smooth time out if she just found the right angle. I didn't know it yet, but that small detail, the timing was going to matter more than anything else. At 6:03 a.m., I called Ray. He picked up on the second ring. "You're early," he said. "You're awake." "I'm old," he replied. "What's wrong?" I told him about the address, the invoices, the formation date. Ray did not interrupt. He never does when something starts to smell like paper. When I finished, he let out a low breath. "Okay," he said. "We're not panicking. I'm not panicking. I know. That's why I said we're not." You'd be surprised how many people think they're calm while lighting their own house on fire. I looked at the numbers again. I funded him, I said. Possibly. I funded him building the structure he's now operating through. Possibly, Ray repeated. Or you funded something adjacent that he later connected himself to, or Elise did, or it's coincidence, which I doubt because you don't call me before sunrise for coincidences. That was fair. "What do?" I asked. Ray paused. I could hear him moving something, papers, maybe a coffee mug. "You do nothing," he said. "I don't like that plan." "You don't have to like it. You have to follow it. You gather quietly. No accusations, no sudden withdrawals, no we need to talk speeches. You let them believe the current story is holding." I tapped my pen against the notebook. Once, twice. Why? Because if there's a pattern, it will continue. And if it continues, it will leave a trail. And if it leaves a trail, we can use it. But if you confront too early, they tighten up. They change behavior. They move things. Then we're guessing instead of proving. I knew that. Of course I did. Cleverness is fast. What I do is slow. Ray added, "Also, and I'm saying this as your friend, not your attorney, you need to decide what outcome you actually want." "I want the truth." "No," he said gently. "You want something to do with the truth." I did not answer. He continued, "Do you want to protect your assets, your daughter, your relationship with her, or do you want to punish him because those are not always the same path?" I stared at Lydia's photograph on the shelf. "We're not punishing anyone," I said. "Good," Ray replied, "because punishment is messy. Consequences are cleaner." I wrote that down. "Consequences are cleaner. Send me copies of everything you have," he said. "I'll take a look." Discreetly. "Of course." "And Daniel?" "Yes. Do not underestimate your daughter." That landed harder than I expected. After I hung up, I sat there for a while. Then I opened my laptop again and did something I had not done in years. I started a new file, Harlan Personal Review. I typed the date. Then I began listing every financial interaction between me and Elise over the past 2 years. Dates, amounts, purpose, method, notes, $21,764. Student loan payoff, 5/3, $14,200. HVAC 8/19, $35,000. Business bridge, 10/7, $9,600. Software, 11 halves, $18,750. Vendor deposit, 11/18, $52,000. Operating account, 1/12. I added a column. Source documents verified, YN. Then another. Third party involved. The more I wrote, the quieter I became. Understatement matters here. I did not feel rage. I felt alignment. Like something that had been slightly off in the world was slowly clicking into place, one detail at a time. At 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Elise, I let it ring once, then answered. "Morning," I said. Her voice was careful. "Did you sleep?" "A little. I'm sorry about yesterday." "For what part?" There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "All of it," she said. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. All of it is a wide category. I know, she said quietly. I should have told you sooner. Yes. Another pause. And Marcus, she continued, he can come across strong sometimes, but he means well. I almost said something sharp. I did not. Meaning well is a useful reputation, I said. She sighed. Dad, I'm listening. We wanted to build something on our own before bringing you into it, not because we don't trust you, because we wanted to prove we could. There it was again. We. Build what? I asked. Our consulting firm. The advisory work. It's been going well. How long have you been involved in that? She hesitated. About a year, she said. A year, not 6 months. I wrote that down with my free hand. I didn't know that, I said. I know. Why not? Because every time I tried to tell you, it turned into numbers, questions, structure, and I just needed something that was ours for a while. That sentence was honest and incomplete. You think I would have taken it over? I said. No, she said quickly. I think you would have made it better, and then it wouldn't feel like ours anymore. I leaned back in my chair. That's an interesting fear, I said. It's not a fear, she replied softly. It's just how things have been. I almost smiled. Almost. Because sometimes the thing you think is your strength is exactly what pushes people to work around you. I understand, I said. That was not entirely true, but it was enough for now. She exhaled. Thank you. Of course. We hung up. I sat there, looking at the word year in my notebook. Something in my stomach shifted again. Not violently, just enough. That afternoon, I drove out to Frisco, not to confront, to observe. Elise lived in a newer development off Lebanon Road. Clean lines, identical mailboxes, landscaping that looked like it had been assembled from a catalog. I parked 2 streets over. Old habit, no need to announce yourself when you're not invited. I walked past her building at 2:38 p.m. Her car was there, a black Audi Q5, 2020 model. I had helped with the down payment 2 years ago, $7,500. I remembered because she insisted on paying me back in installments, and I insisted on pretending I cared. Marcus's car was not there. Good. I sat on a bench across from the building and waited. You learn patience in my line of work. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind that looks like nothing is happening. At 3:11 p.m., a man came out of the building carrying a box. Not Marcus, younger, early 20s, company polo shirt. He loaded the box into a white van with a logo on the side. VNA Logistics. I did not move. The van idled for a moment, then drove off. I wrote down the license plate, because of course I did. At 4:02 p.m., Elise came out, alone. She checked her phone, adjusted her bag, and walked to her car. She looked tired, not physically, structurally, like something was being held up inside her that required constant effort. I felt something then, not anger, concern, because whatever this was, it was not simple. And simple problems are the only ones you can solve quickly. I went home that night. I reviewed the license plate through a contact I had not used in years. A retired investigator named Carlos Mendez, who now did consulting, which in his case meant he still enjoyed finding things out. He called me back at 9:47 p.m. Plate is registered to Val North Advisory, he said. Of course it is. Delivery van, light commercial, recently added to fleet. Fleet, I repeated. Yeah, Carlos said. 2 vehicles on record. The van and a sedan. Both financed. Through? Regional lender. Not one of the big banks. I wrote that down. Anything else? I asked. Carlos hesitated. You want unofficial or very unofficial? Very. There's a note on the financing application. Co-signer. Who? He read the name. I closed my eyes for a second because I knew that name. It was not Marcus. It was Elise. I thanked Carlos and hung up. Then I sat there in the quiet of my house, the same quiet that had followed Lydia's absence, the same quiet that had filled spaces I thought were already empty. And I understood something I had been avoiding since Kroger. This was not just a man taking advantage of my daughter. This was my daughter choosing to stand next to him while it happened. I did not raise my voice. There was no one to hear it. I went very, very quiet. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I put on a tie, not because I had anywhere formal to go, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because ties have a way of reminding you that you're stepping into something deliberate. You don't wear one by accident. It was 7:18 a.m. when I tightened the knot in the mirror. The omega sat just above my wrist bone, the small nick catching the light the way it always did. Lydia used to say that Nick made the watch honest. I hadn't thought about that in years. I picked up my notebook, slipped it into my jacket, and left the house. Here's the thing. When a pattern starts to reveal itself, you don't rush to the end. You follow it. You let it show you where it wants to go. That's how you avoid building conclusions out of guesses. And trust me, guesses are expensive. I drove to a small office park off Legacy Drive, about 12 minutes from Elisa's place. I knew where I was going because the address tied to Vale North Advisory wasn't her condo. It was a suite in a low beige building with a landscaping job that tried very hard to look intentional. Suite 204, no large signage, just a printed placard beside the door. VNA Advisory Group, different name, same initials. That was the third red flag. I parked across the lot, engine off, windows cracked just enough to let in the morning air. A man in a blue polo walked in at 7:42 a.m. carrying a laptop bag. Another arrived at 7:56. The white van I had seen the day before pulled in at 8:03. Marcus arrived at 8:11. Black sedan, clean, quiet engine. He stepped out, adjusting his cuff phone already at his ear. He smiled at something, laughed once, then his face dropped the moment the call ended. I mean that literally. The smile didn't fade, it shut off. He went inside without looking around. I waited. At 8:27 a.m., I got out of my car. I walked into the building like I belonged there. That's a trick most people underestimate. Belonging isn't about permission. It's about pace. If you move like you've been somewhere 100 times, most people assume you have. Suite 204's door was unlocked. Inside, the space was exactly what I expected and slightly worse. 3 desks, 1 glass conference table, 2 whiteboards filled with bullet points that tried to look like strategy. Words like pipeline, conversion, scaling opportunities, the kind of language that floats just above meaning without ever landing. There were 3 employees, maybe 4, counting Marcus. A young woman looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" I smiled. "I'm here to see Marcus. Do you have an appointment?" "No." She hesitated. Then Marcus's voice came from the back office. "It's fine, send him in." Of course it was. I walked past the desks, noting details without staring. Branded folders, fresh, not worn. A printer with low ink warnings. A coffee machine that had been used too often for a company this size. Marcus stood when I entered. "Daniel," he said, smiling. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I closed the door behind me. "Curiosity," I said. He gestured to a chair. "Please." I sat. He did not. Power move. Standing while the other sits. I almost smiled. Almost. "You could have called," he said. "I could have." I agreed. Silence. Raise voice again. Let him talk. Marcus leaned against his desk, casual, controlled. "I assume this is about yesterday." "Partly." And the other part? I looked around the office once more, then back at him. You've built something here. We have, he said quickly. We. Impressive, I said. Thank you. How long? He smiled. Depends on what you mean. I'm a simple man, Marcus. I mean time. He chuckled lightly. About a year of real development, 6 months operational. I nodded. Those numbers matched Elise's version. Consistency matters. Funding? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Private, specific private? Investors who believe in the model. I tilted my head slightly. Model. Advisory. Growth. Optimization. Helping small to mid-sized businesses scale without overextending. You said that Sunday. He spread his hands. It's what we do. Who are your clients? Confidential. Of course. Silence again. This time longer. Marcus shifted. Not much. Just enough. You didn't come here to admire the decor, he said finally. No. Then say what you came to say. I leaned back in the chair. I reviewed some invoices last night. His eyes flickered. Just once. But it was there. Small tells are everything. Okay, he said carefully. They had your address on them. Pause. Old address, he replied. We used a shared space before moving here. That's not what the filing says. Another pause. Slightly longer. I watched his jaw. That slow grinding thing again. Filings lag, he said. Sometimes. We held eye contact. This is where most people escalate. Raise their voice. Push harder. Try to win the moment. I didn't. I held up one hand. Just one. Marcus, I said quietly, I'm not here to argue. He blinked. Because that removed the script he was expecting. I'm here to understand. That word matters. Understand. Not accuse, not confront. Understand. He exhaled slowly, recalibrating. Then ask, he said. I already did. And I answered. Not completely. A beat. Then another. The office noise outside the door faded into something distant, like it had stepped back to watch. Marcus walked around his desk and sat opposite me, leveling. That was new. Daniel, he said, lowering his voice, I get why this looks concerning. Looks? Interesting choice. But Elise and I are building something real here, something that works. Yes, there was overlap early on with her design business. Yes, we used resources that were available, but everything has been above board. Above board. That phrase is always followed by something that technically qualifies as true. Define available, I said. He smiled slightly. Support, connections, capital where necessary. Mine. He didn't answer. Silence again. I let it sit because silence is uncomfortable for people who rely on control through conversation. Finally, he said indirectly. I nodded. There it was. Not a confession, but a step. And Elise? I asked. What about her? She understands the structure? Of course. Fully? He hesitated. There it was again. That small gap between question and answer. Yes, he said. I wrote that down later. Not the word. The hesitation. Good, I said. He leaned forward slightly. Daniel, with respect, this feels like an audit. It is, I said. I did not soften it. I did not dress it up. It is. His smile tightened. You don't audit family, he said. I audit patterns, I replied. That landed. Harder than anything else I had said. He leaned back again, reassessing. Then what's the outcome here, he asked. What do you want? There it was. Ray's question. Coming back from the other side. What do you want? I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said clarity. He studied me, trying to decide if that was true. It was. Just not the whole truth. I can give you that, he said finally. I'm sure you can. I stood. He stood with me. We were close enough now that I could see the small imperfection in his left cuff. Loose thread. He hadn't noticed it yet. Details. Always details. Marcus, I said, I appreciate your time. Of course. I moved toward the door, then paused, turned back. One more thing. Yes? I've spent most of my life watching people explain things. He nodded slowly. I'm very good at hearing what they don't say. Silence. Then I opened the door and walked out. The young woman at the front desk looked up again. I gave her a polite nod. She returned it, uncertain. Outside, the air felt warmer, clearer. I sat in my car for a moment, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Then I took out my notebook and I wrote, "He knows I know." Underneath that, he thinks that's enough. I closed the notebook, started the engine, and for the first time since Kroger, I allowed myself a single, quiet thought. He has no idea how far ahead this started. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So thank you for real. That evening, Ray called. I've looked at your documents, he said. And I have a question. Go ahead. Did you ever formally document those transfers to Elise? Yes. How? Personal loan agreements for some, gifts for others. Structured? Very. Of course they are, he muttered. You're you. I almost smiled. Almost. What are you seeing? I asked. A path, he said. Explain. There's enough here to establish a pattern of reliance, enough to question intent if those funds were redirected without disclosure. But we need more. More what? Direct linkage. Not just your money moving to Elise. We need to show it moving through her into something else. Something controlled by him. I thought about the invoices, the address, the van. We're close, I said. We're not close, Ray corrected. We're at the edge of close. Don't rush it. I won't. Good. Because once we move clean. No noise, no drama, just facts. Facts. That word again. Simple, heavy, necessary. After the call, I walked into my garage. I don't know why. Maybe because it's the one place in the house where everything has a clear purpose. Tools where they belong. Measurements that mean something. Cuts that either fit or don't. I picked up an old tape measure, extended it, retracted it, measured twice, cut once. Old habits, useful habits. I stood there for a while, the quiet settling around me like it always does when something is about to change, and I realized something I hadn't fully accepted until that moment. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about Marcus. It was about my daughter standing inside something she thought she controlled, and me deciding whether to pull her out or let her see it collapse. Tuesday settled into Wednesday with a kind of quiet that felt intentional, like the house itself understood we were waiting for something to surface. I kept my routine, up at 5:40, coffee at 5:52, notebook open by 6. The small rituals matter. They keep your hands steady when the rest of you is shifting. At 7:08 a.m., I received an email from Ray. No greeting, just 3 attachments and 1 line. Review before you speak to anyone. I opened the first file. Bank routing traces. Clean, precise, unemotional. Funds moving from my accounts into Elise's. That part I knew. What I didn't know, what I had not yet seen laid out this way, was what happened next. 3 of those transfers, including the $18,750 vendor deposit and the $52,000 operating infusion, had partial outbound matches within 72 hours, same amounts, different descriptions, destination accounts tied to Vale North Advisory. I sat back slowly. There's a moment when suspicion becomes structure, when a loose idea becomes something with edges and weight. That was that moment. I did not react. I did not need to. I turned to the second attachment, corporate filings, cross-reference. Vale North Advisory, VNA Logistics, and two smaller entities registered under variations of the same naming structure, all connected through Marcus, all established within a 14-month window. Not illegal, not even unusual, but the pattern was deliberate. Too deliberate. The third attachment was a note from Ray. Short, direct. This is enough to ask questions, not enough to make accusations. Yet. That word matters. I closed the files and looked at my notebook. Then I wrote, flow confirmed. Underneath it, Elise is inside it. I stared at that sentence longer than I expected. Because here's the thing. Numbers are easy. They don't lie. They don't hesitate. They don't look at you across a dinner table and choose silence. People do. At 11:32 a.m., Elise called. I was thinking, she said, without preamble, maybe we should all talk again. Clear the air. Of course she was. Pressure does that. It moves conversations forward before anyone is ready. I'm available, I said. Tonight? Yes. Can we come over? I looked around my kitchen. The same table, the same chairs, Lydia's photograph on the shelf. Yes, I said. She exhaled. Thank you. We hung up. I did not prepare a speech. I did not rehearse lines. I have seen too many people walk into conversations with scripts that collapse the moment reality refuses to follow them. Instead, I prepared something else. Documents. Printed. Organized. Not highlighted. Not annotated. Just present. Facts do not need decoration. At 6:28 p.m., I heard their car in the driveway, 2 minutes early. Elise knocked once, then opened the door like she still lived there. Marcus followed, carrying nothing this time. No wine, no performance. Interesting. We sat at the table again. Same seats, same arrangement. The silence returned like it had been waiting. Outside, Elise spoke first. Dad, I think we need to be honest with each other. I almost smiled. Almost. I agree, I said. Marcus leaned forward slightly. We want to make sure there's no misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. That phrase usually means there is one. I folded my hands on the table. Good, I said. Then let's start with something simple. They both looked at me. How long have funds from Elise's accounts been moving into Vale North Advisory? Elise froze. Not dramatically. Just enough. Marcus did not move at all. Which, if you know anything about control, tells you everything. Daniel, he said calmly, we've already explained that. I held up one hand. Just one. I didn't ask for an explanation, I said quietly. I asked for a duration. Silence. Elise looked at Marcus. That was the moment. Small, easy to miss, but it mattered. She did not answer me. She looked at him. I wrote that down in my head. Finally, she said, about a year. Consistent. Truth or practiced version of it. Thank you, I said. I reached beside me and placed the first document on the table. Not pushed, not slid, placed. Marcus's eyes dropped to it, then lifted, then dropped again. He recognized it. Of course he did. Those are transfer records, I said, from my accounts to Elise. And then onward. Elise's hand moved toward the paper, then stopped halfway. Her fingers hovered above it like touching it might confirm something she wasn't ready to confirm. Marcus spoke carefully. Daniel, with respect, this feels like an escalation. It is not, I said. It is a continuation. Of what? He didn't ask, because he already knew. I tapped the document once. 3 transactions, I said. 72-hour windows, matching amounts, matching paths. Elise swallowed. Marcus leaned back slightly, repositioning. Those funds were used to support operations, he said, which Elise is part of. Yes, I said, through entities you control. He didn't answer. Silence again. I let it sit because silence is where truth gets uncomfortable. Elise finally spoke. Dad, I knew some of it was going into the business. Some interesting word. How much? I asked. She hesitated. I, I didn't track exact amounts. I nodded. That's honest, I said. Marcus shifted. Just enough. Daniel, he said, this is how early stage ventures work. Resources are pooled. Risks are shared. Returns. I raised my hand again. He stopped. I understand how ventures work, I said. I spent 31 years watching them succeed and fail. This is not about structure, it's about disclosure. That word landed. Elise looked at me, eyes sharper now. Or, what are you saying? She asked. I met her gaze. I'm saying, I said slowly, that money I provided to you for one purpose was redirected into another without clear communication. Her face tightened. That's not fair, she said. It's accurate. Marcus leaned forward. We never intended to mislead you. Intended, another interesting word. I didn't say you intended anything, I replied. He paused, because that removed another script. Elise looked between us. Dad, I wasn't hiding anything. I didn't think you'd understand the way we were structuring things. I almost smiled. Almost. Try me, I said. Silence. Then Marcus spoke again, slower now. We're building something scalable, something that frankly wouldn't exist without the initial support. And yes, that support included your contributions, but that doesn't make it yours. There it was. Clean, clear, and exactly what I needed him to say. I leaned back in my chair. I never said it was mine, I said. He blinked. Once. That small flicker again. Then what is this? He asked. I looked at Elise, not at him. At some point, I said, you stopped telling me the full truth, and at some point you started relying on the idea that I wouldn't notice. Her eyes dropped, just for a second, but it was enough. I noticed, I said. Nobody spoke. The room held it, all of it. Then Marcus exhaled slowly. So what happens now? That question again. What do you want? I thought about Ray's voice, about Lydia, about the notebook in my pocket, about the way Elise had looked at Marcus before answering me, and I made a decision. I'm not here to shut anything down, I said. Both of them looked up, surprised. Good. I'm here to make sure everything is clear moving forward. Marcus nodded slowly. We can do that. I'm glad, I said. I reached for the second document. A draft, prepared that afternoon. Simple, clean, an acknowledgement of prior fund flows, a formal restructuring of any future financial involvement, clear boundaries, clear terms, no ambiguity. I placed it on the table. This, I said, is what clarity looks like. Elise picked it up. Read the first line. Her hand trembled slightly. Marcus leaned in beside her. Read faster. His jaw did that thing again. That slow grinding thing. What is this? He asked. A line, I said. He looked up at me. Cross it, and we proceed cleanly, I continued. Don't, and I step back entirely. No more support. No more involvement. Everything stands on its own. Silence. Heavy. Measured. Elise looked at me. Dad, this feels like a contract. It is. With your daughter. Yes. Her eyes softened. Hurt. Confusion. Understanding. All at once. Marcus spoke, sharper now. You're leveraging your position. I shook my head. No, I said. I'm defining it. That landed hard because there's a difference, a big one. He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. And if we don't sign, then nothing changes, I said calmly, except my involvement. Elise looked at him again, that moment, again, and this time I saw it clearly, the shift, small but real, because for the first time, she wasn't just looking for his answer. She was measuring it. I sat there, hands still, voice quiet. I didn't raise my voice, I said. I didn't need to. Nobody spoke for a while. The silence sat with us, not hostile, just present. Then Elise whispered, I need time. Of course, I said. Marcus nodded slowly. We'll review it. I expect you will. They stood. So did I. At the door, Elise hugged me, longer this time. Her hand rested on my back, not checking, holding. Marcus shook my hand, firm, controlled, but different, less certain. Good night, Daniel, he said. Good night, Marcus. I watched them leave. Again. But this time, something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. I closed the door, walked back to the table, and looked at the empty chairs. Then I took out my notebook and wrote one final line for the night. They think this is about control. I paused. Then added, it's about consequence. They took 3 days. Not 2, not 4, 3. That told me more than anything they could have said. Quick decisions are emotional. Long delays are strategic. 3 days sits in the middle, long enough to feel the pressure, short enough to believe you still control the outcome. Wednesday night passed quietly. Thursday, I reorganized a drawer that did not need reorganizing. Friday morning at 9:16 a.m., Elise texted, can we come by tonight? I looked at the message for a moment, then set the phone down, poured another cup of coffee, and waited exactly 5 minutes before replying, yes, 6:30. Same time. Consistency matters. It tells people the structure hasn't moved, even if everything else has. At 6:29 p.m., they were in the driveway, 1 minute early. Again, patterns. Elise walked in first. No knock this time. She had always moved through this house like it was an extension of her own body. Marcus followed, slower, carrying a thin leather folder. Interesting. We sat at the table, same seats, same quiet. The house had settled into this rhythm with us like it knew its role. Elise placed her hands flat on the table, palms down, grounding herself. Marcus opened the folder. He slid the document toward me, signed both of them. I did not reach for it immediately. I looked at Elise first. Her eyes were tired. Not from lack of sleep, from thinking, from recalibrating something internal that had been running one way for too long. You read it, I said. She nodded. I did. And? She swallowed. I should have been clearer with you about everything. That was not a full admission, but it was enough. I nodded once. Marcus spoke next. We've agreed to the terms. His voice was steady, measured, but there was something under it now. Awareness. Good. I picked up the document, flipped through the pages, every signature where it needed to be, every clause intact. No edits, no quiet changes. That surprised me. A little. Thank you, I said. I set it down. And for a moment, nobody spoke. Because the thing had been done. The line had been drawn. Now came the part most people misunderstand. They think this is where the confrontation happens. The victory speech, the emotional release. It isn't. This is where you decide what kind of man you are after you've already won. I leaned back slightly, resting my hands on the table. Elise, I said. She looked up. Yes? I need you to understand something. She nodded slowly. I never needed this document to know what was happening. Her brow furrowed. Then why? Because you did. Silence. She blinked. Once, twice. Marcus didn't move. I continued, voice even. You needed to see it written, structured, real, not implied, not assumed. Her eyes softened. And then, for the first time since Kroger, I saw something I recognized fully. Not defensiveness, not justification, clarity. I thought I was protecting something, she said quietly. I know. But I wasn't, she added. No, I said. You weren't. She exhaled, a long, slow breath that seemed to take something heavy with it. Marcus shifted slightly. We're moving forward cleanly now. I turned to him. Yes, I said. You are. He held my gaze, trying to read what wasn't being said. I let him. Then I said, there's one more thing. Elise looked at me again. Marcus straightened. I reached beside me and picked up a second folder. Thicker. Older. I placed it on the table. Neither of them touched it. This, I said, is everything I didn't bring last time. Marcus's jaw tightened. Elise looked between us. What is it? Documentation, I said. Every transfer, every invoice, every connection between your accounts and his entities. Silence. Heavy. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Why are you showing us this now? I met his eyes. Because we're done negotiating. That landed. Hard. Elise's hand moved toward the folder this time. She opened it, flipped the first page, then the second. Her breathing changed. Subtle, but real. These are all connected, she said. Yes. She looked at Marcus. Not for permission this time, for confirmation. He didn't speak. That told her everything. I didn't see all of this, she whispered. I know, I said. Marcus finally spoke, quieter now. We were going to expand disclosure once things stabilized. I almost smiled. Almost. Of course you were, I said. He looked at me sharply, not aggressive, just aware. This stays here, I continued, with us. No legal action, no external consequences, as long as everything from this point forward aligns with what you've signed. Elise looked up. You're not reporting this? No. Marcus studied me. Why not? Good question. I sat there for a moment, letting it settle. Then I answered, because this isn't about destroying anything. I paused. It's about ending something correctly. Silence. The kind that doesn't push, doesn't demand, just exists. Elise closed the folder slowly. I don't regret what I built, she said. I know, I replied. I regret how I built it. I nodded. That's enough. Marcus leaned back, exhaling through his nose. The tension in his shoulders shifted, not gone, but redistributed. You could have done more, he said. I agreed. You had the leverage. I still do. He held my gaze. Then he nodded. Once. Respect. Reluctant, but real. We sat there a while longer, not talking much. The conversation had already happened. Everything else would have been noise. Eventually they stood. Elise hugged me again. Longer this time. Different. Her hand stayed on my back a second after we pulled apart. Thank you, she said. For what? For not making it worse. I almost smiled. Almost. Go build something honest, I said. She nodded. Marcus shook my hand. No performance this time, no extra pressure, just a handshake. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Marcus. They left. The door closed. The house returned to its quiet. I stood there for a moment, then walked back to the table. The two folders sat side by side, one signed, one not. I gathered them, placed them in my file cabinet, and locked it. Old habit. Useful habit. Then I walked into the garage. I don't know why I keep going back there. Maybe because it's the one place where outcomes are immediate. You measure, you cut, it either fits or it doesn't. I picked up the tape measure again, extended it, retracted it. The sound echoed softly in the space. Measure twice, cut once. I leaned against the workbench and looked at nothing in particular. Some days, I wonder if I did the right thing. Most days, I know I did. That's enough. I don't see Elise every Sunday at 6:30 anymore. Sometimes it's every other week. Sometimes we reschedule. We're civil, closer, in a quieter way, careful. Marcus still runs his firm. From what I can tell, it's cleaner now, structured, transparent, or at least more aware of being watched. I don't involve myself. I don't need to. Here's the thing. Control isn't about holding everything. It's about knowing when you don't have to. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere. That night before bed, I took off my watch and ran my thumb over the small nick near the bezel. Lydia used to say it made the watch honest. I think she was right. I set it down on the nightstand, turned off the light, and let the quiet do what it does best. Hold what's left